Number 1. 1968 Ford Fairlane 500. Offered at $27,000 and currently located in Westbrook, Minnesota. In my opinion, this 1968 Fairlane 500 is one of those classic Ford sleeper builds that quietly delivers serious performance without needing to look extreme or over-modified. It has the kind of specification that appeals to enthusiasts who appreciate factory big block muscle combined with thoughtful mechanical upgrades. The standout feature here is the factory S-Code 390 paired with a 4-speed manual transmission and a locking rear differential. In my opinion, that combination alone already places this Fairlane in the upper tier of classic Ford muscle cars from the late 1960s. It was designed for strong torque delivery and a more engaging driving experience, especially when paired with the wide ratio gearbox mentioned in the listing. What I find especially interesting is the focus on drivability. The seller highlights a 3.0 rear gear ratio, which in my opinion is a smart balance between acceleration and highway cruising. Being able to sit at around 2,000 revolutions per minute on the highway makes a big block car like this far more usable for long-distance driving. The list of recent maintenance and upgrades is also extensive. Items such as refreshed fluids, updated U-joints, rebuilt clutch components, ignition upgrades to electronic ignition, and a service fuel system all suggest this car has been actively maintained rather than simply stored. In my opinion, that level of attention is important in a car with both age and performance use. Another detail I like is the rear end rebuild with new bearings and posy clutches set slightly tighter than factory spec. That tells me the car is not just about originality. It has been tuned for better traction and performance while still respecting its original character. Visually, the presidential blue exterior with parchment interior is a very classic late 60s Ford combination. In my opinion, it suits the Fairlane's understated muscle car personality, especially since the seller describes it as a sleeper. It doesn't rely on aggressive styling to make its point. It lets the drivetrain do the talking. I also appreciate the honesty in the listing regarding imperfections like small bumps on the deck lid and roof. In my opinion, that adds credibility and reinforces that this is a driver-quality classic rather than a fully restored show car. Overall, my opinion is that this 1968 Ford Fairlane 500 represents a well-sorted long-term owned muscle car that prioritizes real-world usability. With its S-Code 390, 4-speed transmission, locking rear end, and road trip-friendly setup, it appears to be a strong example of a classic Ford that can genuinely be enjoyed on both short drives and long highway runs. Number 2. 1966 Ford Mustang Coupe. Offered at $28,000 and currently located in O'Neill, Nebraska. In my opinion, this 1966 Mustang appears to be a well-built Restomod-style classic that focuses heavily on drivability, performance upgrades, and comfort rather than strict factory originality. While purists may prefer a numbers-matching small block configuration, this example has clearly been enhanced to deliver a more modern and enjoyable driving experience while still retaining the iconic first-generation Mustang look. The biggest highlight is the upgraded 347-stroker engine. This is a popular performance build based on Ford's small block platform, known for significantly improved torque and horsepower compared to a standard 289 or 302. Paired with a 4-speed manual transmission and 3.25 rear gears, the drivetrain setup suggests a balanced combination of street performance and highway usability, making the car suitable for both cruising and spirited driving. Another strong feature is the inclusion of vintage air conditioning, which is a highly desirable upgrade for classic Mustangs, especially for owners in warmer climates or those planning to use the car regularly during summer months. The seller notes that the system works well, which adds real-world usability that many older classics lack. The car also benefits from a front disc brake conversion, which significantly improves stopping performance compared to the original drum brake setup. This is an important safety upgrade that enhances driver confidence, especially given the increased performance from the stroker engine. The seller claims the car is approximately 95% rust-free and originated from Louisiana, which is generally a positive indicator in terms of body condition. Southern-sourced vehicles often avoid the heavy corrosion issues seen in northern climates, although a careful inspection is still essential when evaluating any classic Mustang. Visually, the Mustang is equipped with Billet Specialties street light wheels, which give it a more modern and performance-oriented appearance. Combined with the blue exterior and black interior, the car maintains a classic muscle car identity while incorporating subtle Restomod styling cues. Interior-wise, the seller states that it is in very nice condition and that all gauges are functional, which is an encouraging sign of proper maintenance and attention to detail. The addition of 3-point seat belts in both front and rear seats is another practical and safety-focused upgrade that improves usability for passengers. At an asking price of $28,000, I believe this Mustang is positioned competitively for a modified first-generation example with strong performance upgrades and comfort improvements. While it may not appeal to collectors seeking fully original restorations, it is likely very attractive to buyers who want a turnkey classic they can drive immediately without needing significant mechanical investment. Overall, I think this 1966 Ford Mustang Coupe represents a well-rounded restomod that blends classic styling with modern performance and comfort upgrades. The combination of a 347-stroker engine, manual transmission, air conditioning, disc brakes, and solid body condition makes it a compelling driver-focused classic that is ready for regular use and enjoyment. Number 3. 1971 Dodge Dart Swinger 340 with AC. Listed at $22,900 and located in Carpentersville, Illinois. In my opinion, this Dart Swinger sits in a very appealing middle zone between classic muscle car and upgraded driver. It keeps the recognizable compact Mopar A body formula but has been modified enough to make it more usable, more powerful, and more comfortable than a typical stock example. The most important part of the listing is the 340 V8 with significant internal upgrades. Edelbrock aluminum heads, forged Speed Pro pistons, PRW rocker shafts, Morel lifters, and a comp cam. In my opinion, this is no longer a mild rebuild. It reads like a properly built street performance engine. The 340 is already a strong platform from the factory, and with these upgrades it likely produces a noticeable increase in horsepower and torque while still being street-driven. Backing that is a 737 3-speed automatic transmission paired with a 3.23 Sure Grip rear end. That combination suggests a balance between acceleration and highway usability. The Sure Grip differential is especially important in a car like this, because it allows the power to be put down more effectively when traction is limited. When combined with the engine build, it supports the seller's claim that the car can go sideways when you want to, which is essentially a polite way of saying it still behaves like a proper muscle car when driven aggressively. One of the strongest features in my opinion is the vintage air system. Classic Mopars are known for being hot inside, so having functional air conditioning and heat significantly increases real-world usability. This is often one of the biggest factors that determines whether a classic car gets driven regularly or just taken out occasionally. The addition of a custom digital dash also suggests a focus on modern usability. While some purists might prefer original gauges, digital instrumentation typically improves readability, reliability, and overall driving experience. Combined with LED lighting upgrades, this car is clearly set up with convenience in mind. However, the listing also includes several honest imperfections. The paint is rated around 6.5 to 7 out of 10 with visible marks and bubbles. The headliner is temporarily held up with magnets, although a replacement is included. The wipers also work intermittently. In my opinion, these details are important because they show this is not a fully restored show car. It is more of a strong driver that still needs finishing touches. That honesty actually matters in valuation. Cars that are described realistically tend to be more trustworthy than overly polished listings that hide flaws. Here, the seller is fairly open about condition issues, which gives a clearer picture of what the buyer is getting. At $22,900, this Dart Swinger appears relatively fairly priced considering the engine build, air conditioning system, Sure Grip rear end, and overall performance focus. In my opinion, it sits in the category of a usable, modified classic that prioritizes driving enjoyment over originality or collector-grade restoration. Overall, my opinion is that this 1971 Dodge Dart Swinger 340 is a well-built street muscle car with strong mechanical upgrades, good usability features, and honest cosmetic wear. It is not a perfect restoration, but it appears to be a capable and enjoyable driver that delivers real Mopar performance in a compact, classic package. Number 4. 1968 Chevrolet Chevelle SS Tribute, offered at $44,000 and currently located in Norwalk, Iowa. From my perspective, this is a fairly typical, tribute-style big block Chevelle build that prioritizes street presence and straight-line performance over strict factory authenticity. The Chevelle name carries a lot of weight in the muscle car world, and even tribute builds tend to attract strong attention when they're properly put together. The most important detail here is the drivetrain combination. A 454 big block paired with an automatic transmission gives this car a clear performance focus. In my opinion, the 454 is one of Chevrolet's most iconic big blocks, known for strong low-end torque and effortless acceleration. Even in a tribute car, that engine fundamentally defines the driving experience. The SS Tribute styling is also a key factor. While it may not be a factory 396 SS, the visual identity of a Chevelle SS, badging, stance, and overall presentation, still carries strong appeal in the classic car market. Personally, I think the Chevelle shape is one of the most universally admired designs from the late 1960s, which helps even non-original examples maintain value. The interior setup is described as bucket seats with an automatic transmission, which aligns with the SS style configuration. However, the listing is relatively sparse on interior condition details, so in my opinion, that's an area that would require closer inspection in person, especially for fit, finish, and overall quality of the build. One point of concern is the note that money is still owed on the vehicle. From an ownership perspective, that is an important detail. In my opinion, it doesn't automatically make the car a bad purchase, but it does add a layer of complexity regarding title transfer and lien clearance that a buyer should carefully verify before proceeding. At $44,000, this Chevelle sits in a mid to upper range for tribute builds. In my view, pricing in this category depends heavily on build quality, rust condition, and how well the drivetrain swap and supporting components were executed. Without detailed information on suspension, brakes, and underbody condition, the value judgment remains somewhat open-ended. Overall, my opinion is that this 1968 Chevrolet Chevelle SS Tribute is a visually appealing big block muscle car with strong performance potential thanks to its 454 engine. However, its true value will depend on build quality, mechanical condition, and how cleanly the ownership lien situation is handled. For a buyer focused on driving enjoyment and classic muscle car presence rather than strict originality, it could be a compelling option if those details check out. Number 5. 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle Malibu, listed at $65,000 and located in Richmond, Illinois. In my opinion, this is a textbook example of a properly executed body-off restoration on a very desirable platform, but positioned in a way that makes value heavily dependent on build quality rather than just the parts list. A Chevelle from 1970 already carries strong appeal, and when you combine that with a full frame-off restoration, you are immediately in serious collector territory. The most important detail here is the body-off-the-frame restoration. In my opinion, that phrase matters a lot because it indicates the car was not just cosmetically refreshed, but actually disassembled and rebuilt from the chassis up. The frame being sandblasted and painted, along with new floors, quarters, and doors, suggests that the structural foundation has been fully addressed rather than patched. The exterior presentation also sounds well thought out, with dark green metallic paint and painted stripes. Green is not the most common color for Chevelles, so in my opinion, it adds some uniqueness compared to the typical red or black restorations you often see in the market. However, paint quality in restorations like this can vary significantly depending on prep work, so seeing it in person would be critical. Mechanically, the setup is fairly traditional but effective. A stock 350 engine paired with a TH350 automatic transmission and a 10-bolt rear end is a very common and proven combination for a street-driven Chevelle. In my opinion, this is not a high-end performance build, but rather a reliable cruiser configuration designed for usability and ease of maintenance. The addition of an Edelbrock 654 barrel carb, aluminum intake, headers, and dual exhaust gives it a mild performance boost over stock without pushing the car into extreme territory. This kind of setup usually delivers good drivability with a bit more sound and responsiveness, which suits a restored Malibu well. One of the stronger points in this listing is the inclusion of modernized suspension and braking components. New tubular control arms, fresh springs and shocks, new brake lines, and updated bushings all indicate that the car is not just visually restored but also mechanically refreshed underneath. In my opinion, that significantly improves long-term ownership value because it reduces the likelihood of immediate suspension or safety-related repairs. The inclusion of working air conditioning is another important feature. For a classic Chevelle, especially one with a full restoration, functional AC adds real-world comfort and usability, which many buyers now consider essential rather than optional. The fuel system upgrades, including new lines and a new gas tank, are also a positive indicator. In my opinion, replacing fuel system components during a restoration is a sign that the build was done with attention to reliability rather than just appearance. At $65,000, this Chevelle sits in a competitive segment of the market. In my opinion, the value here depends less on the list of new parts and more on the quality of workmanship, panel alignment, paint depth, undercarriage finish, wiring quality, and overall attention to detail. A frame-off restoration can range from excellent to merely acceptable, and that difference is often what determines whether the price feels justified. If I were inspecting this car, I would pay close attention to the underside finish of the frame, the quality of welds on the floors and quarters, the consistency of the paintwork, and how well the car drives under real conditions. I would also want to verify whether the freshly restored claim means recently completed or recently refreshed after an older restoration. Overall, my impression is that this 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle Malibu is a strong restoration candidate with a solid specification. Frame-off rebuild, classic small block V8, updated suspension and brakes, and functional air conditioning. It presents as a well-rounded classic muscle car built for cruising and enjoyment rather than pure track performance or strict originality. If the restoration quality matches the description, it fits comfortably within its asking range as a clean, usable, and visually appealing Chevelle from the golden era of American muscle. Number 6. 1964 Ford Galaxie 500 XL. Offered at $10,000 and currently located in Neenah, Wisconsin. In my opinion, this Galaxie 500 XL is one of those classic full-size Fords that sits in an interesting driver project category. It isn't a show car, and it isn't a complete restoration, but it also isn't a dead project either. It's the kind of car that already runs and drives, which immediately gives it more value for someone willing to sort out the remaining issues. The most notable feature here is the 464-barrel V8 swap. In my opinion, that's a significant upgrade in terms of power compared to what the car would have originally come with. The 460 is known for strong torque, and in a heavy full-size car like the Galaxie, that usually translates into relaxed but very powerful cruising performance. The seller is upfront about the mechanical needs: carburetor work, valve cover gaskets, transmission pan gasket, exhaust manifold gasket, and hood hinge repair. In my opinion, this level of transparency is actually helpful because it gives a clear picture of what it takes to get the car fully sorted. None of the listed issues sound catastrophic, but they do suggest the car is currently in a maintain and refine stage rather than ready-to-show condition. Another point I notice is the mention of some rust, but also a clean and mostly complete interior. In my opinion, that combination often means the car has survived better than many similar classics, especially when the cabin is still intact. Interior completeness is usually more difficult and expensive to restore than mechanical wear items. What I like about this Galaxie is that it already runs and drives pretty good, according to the seller. In the classic car world, that phrase usually means it's usable but not perfect. In my opinion, that makes it ideal for someone who wants to improve a car gradually while still being able to enjoy it on the road. The Galaxie 500 XL itself has always been known for its long, elegant body lines and comfortable cruising nature. Even in a project state, that design presence still comes through strongly. Paired with a big block 460, it leans more toward relaxed highway torque than anything sporty, but that fits the personality of the car well. Overall, my opinion is that this 1964 Ford Galaxie 500 XL offers solid potential as a budget-friendly classic with real V8 power already installed. With its running condition, strong engine swap, and manageable list of repair needs, it looks like a straightforward project for someone who wants a full-size American cruiser they can slowly bring up to a better level without starting from scratch. Number 7. 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle. Offered at $39,500 and currently located in Reedsburg, Wisconsin. In my opinion, this 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle appears to be a straightforward classic muscle car build that prioritizes performance and presentation over detailed originality or documentation. The Chevelle name carries strong weight in the American muscle car world, and even later model examples like the 1972 version remain popular among enthusiasts due to their aggressive styling, strong aftermarket support, and overall driving enjoyment. The most notable detail in this listing is the mention of a built motor. While the seller does not specify exact engine specifications, this typically implies internal performance upgrades such as improved camshaft, pistons, or other components designed to increase horsepower and torque beyond factory levels. Combined with a manual transmission, this setup suggests the car is intended to deliver a more engaging and performance-focused driving experience. The seller also states that the interior is new, which is a positive indicator for both comfort and visual appeal. A refreshed interior can significantly improve the overall feel of a classic car, especially in a vehicle like the Chevelle where cabin condition plays a major role in perceived value. The black interior paired with a green exterior is a classic muscle car combination that maintains a strong vintage presence. According to the listing, the car runs great and is in great condition overall. While this is a positive general statement, the lack of detailed information regarding rust condition, specific engine build details, suspension upgrades, or restoration history means that potential buyers would need to perform a more in-depth inspection to fully evaluate its true value and mechanical quality. With reported two-owner history and a clean title, the vehicle appears to have been relatively well cared for over its lifetime. However, as with many older muscle cars, Ownership history alone does not always guarantee structural condition, so a careful review of the frame, underbody, and body panels would still be essential. At an asking price of $39,500, this Chevelle sits in a competitive segment of the classic muscle car market. Non-SS Chevelles and modified examples can vary widely in value depending on the quality of the build and the strength of the documentation. A well-executed built engine and clean presentation can support this price range, but the absence of detailed specifications makes it harder to determine whether the asking price is strong value or slightly optimistic. Overall, I believe this 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle represents a solid driver-focused muscle car that likely offers strong performance and enjoyable road manners. It seems best suited for a buyer who values a ready-to-drive classic with a built engine and refreshed interior rather than a strictly original or factory-correct collector-grade example. If the mechanical build quality and body condition check out in person, it could be a fun and visually appealing classic muscle car with good street presence. Number 8. 1974 Plymouth Roadrunner, listed at $14,700 and located in Ashland, Wisconsin. In my opinion, this is one of the more interesting value anomaly-type listings in your set, mainly because it combines low price, claimed rarity, and a factory-style drivetrain configuration that is increasingly hard to find in unmodified form. The biggest selling point here is the 1 of 772 built claim and the fact that it is described as a black-on-black Roadrunner with a 318 and 3-speed manual. In my opinion, even if that production number needs verification, the combination of a low production color/trim configuration and manual transmission makes it inherently more desirable than the typical later B-body Survivor. Black-on-black muscle-era Mopars are always visually striking, and they tend to hold attention at shows and auctions. The seller also emphasizes that it is a numbers-matching, unmolested Survivor. If accurate, that is a major factor in its appeal. In the classic car world, Survivor cars often occupy a special niche because they retain originality rather than being restored or heavily modified. Even when they show age, originality can sometimes be more valuable than a restored example, depending on the buyer's priorities. Structurally, the mention that the rails and floor pans are nice is one of the most important points in the listing. For Mopar B-bodies especially, frame rails and floor structure are often the deciding factor between a car that is a solid driver and one that becomes a costly restoration project. In my opinion, if the underside condition is genuinely solid, that alone supports the asking price. The drivetrain is relatively modest with a 318 V8 and 3-speed manual. This is not a high-performance muscle setup compared to big block or 340/360 builds, but it does contribute to the car's originality and simplicity. In my opinion, this kind of configuration appeals more to collectors who value authenticity and driving experience over outright speed. One of the weaknesses of this listing is the lack of detail about condition beyond general statements. "Runs great" and "Survivor" are positive phrases, but they do not fully explain paint quality, interior wear, mechanical refresh history, or how well the car has been maintained over time. With Survivor cars especially, those details matter a lot because originality can also mean age-related wear is present. The inclusion of torque thrust wheels is a mild modification, but not unusual for cars of this type. The note that it will need tires suggests that at least some basic maintenance is required before it is fully road-ready, which is not unexpected for a low-priced classic. At $14,700, this Roadrunner appears to be priced quite aggressively compared to most Mopar muscle cars, even in entry-level condition. In my opinion, if the rarity claim holds up and the structural integrity is genuinely good, this could represent a strong value as an original Survivor platform. However, it is also the type of listing where verification is critical. Production claims, rust condition, and drivetrain authenticity should all be confirmed before assigning full value. Overall, my opinion is that this 1974 Plymouth Roadrunner is a potentially interesting Survivor-class Mopar that trades high horsepower for originality and rarity. The black-on-black configuration, manual transmission, and low asking price make it appealing on paper, but its true value depends heavily on how accurate the rarity claim and structural condition are in person. Number 9. 1977 Mercury Grand Marquis, offered at $11,000 and currently located in Rinnard, Illinois. From my perspective, this is a classic full-size American luxury sedan that stands out more for originality and comfort than performance or rarity. The Mercury Grand Marquis of this era represents the traditional big cruiser formula: large body, soft suspension, V8 power, and a strong focus on ride comfort rather than speed. The most interesting detail here is the long-term family ownership. The seller notes it has been in the family since new, which in my opinion is one of the strongest forms of provenance a classic car can have. Continuous ownership like that often suggests consistent maintenance and a lack of neglect over time, even if the car isn't perfect. Mechanically, the car is described as largely original except for the carburetor, with the original parts still included. Personally, I think that's a positive sign for anyone who values authenticity. Having original components retained gives future buyers the option to return the car closer to factory specification if desired. The fact that it runs well and has ice-cold air conditioning and functional heat is a major advantage. In my opinion, comfort features like working AC are especially important in late 1970s full-size cars, because they were designed to be driven, not just displayed. A car this size without working climate control would significantly reduce its usability. One notable issue is the non-functioning headlight doors. While the seller mentions manually flipping them up at night, I see this as a relatively minor electrical or vacuum-related issue typical of cars from this era. It doesn't necessarily impact drivability, but it does affect convenience and originality. The interior and trunk being original is another strong point. In my view, preserved interiors are often more valuable than restored ones in cars like this, because they reflect the car's true history. The mention of a single repaint also suggests the exterior has been refreshed at some point while still maintaining its original character. The seller's description of the ride quality, like you're on air, is very fitting for a Grand Marquis. Personally, I think that's one of the defining traits of these large-body Mercuries. They were engineered for smooth, isolated cruising, and when properly maintained, they still deliver that signature floaty highway experience. At the asking price of $11,000, I think this car sits in a reasonable range for a well-preserved, mostly original full-size luxury sedan with documented long-term ownership. It's not a high-performance or highly collectible muscle car, but that's not its purpose. What I find most appealing about this Grand Marquis is its honesty. It hasn't been heavily modified, it hasn't been turned into a restomod, and it hasn't been stripped of its original identity. Instead, it appears to be a preserved example of a late 1970s American luxury cruiser that can still be driven and enjoyed. Overall, my opinion is that this 1977 Mercury Grand Marquis is a solid survivor-style classic that prioritizes comfort, originality, and usability. For someone who appreciates large vintage American sedans with a smooth ride and strong originality, this example represents a very authentic and enjoyable piece of automotive history. Number 10. 1967 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Holiday Coupe, listed at $12,000 and located in St. Louis, Missouri. In my opinion, this is one of those listings where the value proposition is heavily driven by condition-to-price ratio rather than rarity or restoration quality. A mid-1960s Cutlass Supreme with factory options and a reportedly solid body at this price point is immediately interesting, especially in today's classic car market where clean, usable drivers are getting harder to find under $20,000. The strongest part of this listing is the reported structural condition. The seller claims that the floors, trunk, frame, and undercarriage are solid and still retain factory undercoating. In my opinion, that detail is extremely important because Oldsmobiles of this era are known to rust in the typical Midwest locations. If the underbody is truly original and intact, that alone adds significant value and reduces the biggest financial risk associated with restoration. Another positive point is the factory equipment package. Factory air conditioning, power steering, and power front disc brakes make this car much more usable than a bare-bones classic. In my opinion, these options shift the vehicle from a weekend-only cruiser into something that could realistically be driven more regularly without feeling outdated or unsafe compared to modern traffic conditions. The drivetrain description is slightly unclear, either a 330 or 350 engine is mentioned, but both are solid Oldsmobile V8 options. In my opinion, the important takeaway is not the exact displacement uncertainty, but rather that the car is running and equipped with a V8 that is paired with upgrades like a new Edelbrock AVS2 carburetor and Flowmaster exhaust. Those modifications suggest the car has been maintained and lightly improved for drivability rather than left completely untouched. The addition of a new cold case radiator is another meaningful detail. In my opinion, cooling system upgrades are often a sign that the owner is addressing known aging issues proactively, which improves confidence in the car's reliability as a driver. However, this is not a fully finished or cosmetically restored vehicle. The seller openly mentions that it needs minor bodywork and a headliner. In my opinion, that places this Cutlass in the honest driver category rather than a show-quality or investment-grade restoration. These kinds of imperfections are actually common and expected at this price point, especially for a car that is otherwise structurally solid. The mileage claim of around 30,000 miles is also something that would require verification. In my opinion, low mileage claims on mid-1960s cars should always be treated cautiously unless backed by documentation or consistent wear patterns. That said, even if the mileage is not fully accurate, the overall condition description matters more for practical evaluation. At $12,000, this Cutlass Supreme sits in what I would call a relatively accessible entry point for classic GM ownership. In my opinion, the combination of solid underbody, factory AC, power disc brakes, and a running V8 makes it attractive for someone who wants a usable classic rather than a long-term restoration project. If I were inspecting this car, I would focus on the quality of the solid structure claim, especially rear frame sections and body mounts, evaluate the condition of the interior beyond the headliner, and confirm that the engine and transmission operate smoothly under load. I would also want to check whether the reported upgrades were done correctly and not just installed for appearance. Overall, my impression is that this 1967 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme is a fairly strong driver quality classic with good bones. It is not a fully restored or collector-grade example, but it appears to be a well-optioned, structurally solid, and mechanically improved vehicle that could serve as a dependable entry into the classic car hobby without requiring immediate major restoration work. Number 11. 1971 Chevrolet Nova, offered at $28,500 and currently located in Evansville, Wisconsin. In my opinion, this 1971 Nova is not just a classic muscle car. It's a full-on street machine build that clearly prioritizes performance over originality. From the specification alone, it's obvious this car was built to deliver serious straight-line power rather than stay factory correct. The centerpiece here is the 402 cubic inch big block Chevrolet engine. In my opinion, this is already a strong foundation, but the supporting parts are what really define the car's character. With 10:1 compression TRW pistons, scat rods, a steel crank, and a fully balanced rotating assembly, this is not a mild build. It's engineered for high output and sustained performance. The camshaft profile listed at .550 lift and 292 duration suggests a fairly aggressive setup. In my opinion, that kind of cam will give the car a strong low-P idle and a noticeable power band, especially when combined with a Holley 850 double-pumper carburetor and Edelbrock air gap intake. This is very much a traditional big block muscle recipe. Another detail that stands out is the Super T 10 4-speed manual transmission paired with a 12-bolt rear end and 3.75 gears. In my opinion, this combination is ideal for a lightweight Nova because it allows the engine to stay in its power range while still delivering strong acceleration. It's a classic drag-inspired street setup. The Hooker Super Comp headers and full exhaust system reinforce the performance intent here. Personally, I see this as a car that is meant to be heard just as much as it is meant to be driven. Combined with the Pertronix ignition and electric fuel pump, the car also appears to have been upgraded for reliability alongside performance. Visually, the Candy Brandywine metallic paint and Craigar SST wheels with staggered Mickey Thompson tires give it a very traditional muscle car stance. In my opinion, that look matches the mechanical setup perfectly. It's aggressive without trying to look modern or overly refined. What I find most important about this Nova is that it is clearly built with a purpose. This is not a stock restoration or a mild cruiser. It's a purpose-built street/strip-style car that leans heavily toward performance driving. Overall, my opinion is that this 1971 Chevrolet Nova would appeal most to enthusiasts who want a raw, old-school muscle car experience. With its big block engine build, manual transmission, aggressive gearing, and drag-inspired setup, it appears to be a serious performance machine rather than a casual weekend cruiser. Number 12. 1975 Cadillac Calais, offered at $4,200 and currently located in Carrollton, Missouri. In my opinion, this 1975 Cadillac Calais appears to be an interesting entry-level classic luxury car that prioritizes comfort, size, and character over performance or collectability. While it is not one of Cadillac's most iconic or highly sought-after models, it still carries the unmistakable presence and cruising personality that defined mid-1970s American luxury vehicles. The most notable feature is the 500 cubic inch V8 engine, which is one of the largest production engines ever offered in a passenger car. While these engines were tuned more for smooth, effortless torque rather than high performance, they are known for delivering a relaxed and powerful driving experience, especially in large luxury sedans like this Calais. Paired with an automatic transmission, the setup is clearly designed for comfortable, low-stress cruising. According to the seller, the car runs and drives well, and key power accessories such as the power windows and power seats are functional. For a vehicle of this era, having working convenience features is a strong positive, as electrical issues can often be one of the more time-consuming and expensive aspects of ownership. Another encouraging detail is the claim of little to no rust. For mid-1970s American cars, rust condition is often one of the most important factors affecting value and usability. If accurate, this significantly improves the appeal of the vehicle, especially at the very low asking price point. The reported mileage of 64,400 miles also suggests relatively limited use over its lifetime, although as with any older vehicle, verification would be important. Still, combined with the seller's description of a running and driving car, it points toward a vehicle that may have been used sparingly or well maintained over the years. Visually, the pink exterior with a red interior is an unusual and highly distinctive color combination. While it may not appeal to all buyers, it does reflect the bold styling choices often seen in 1970s luxury cars. For some enthusiasts, this uniqueness can actually increase the charm and personality of the vehicle, especially as a weekend cruiser or novelty classic. At an asking price of $4,200, I believe this Cadillac stands out more as an affordable classic cruiser than a serious collector vehicle. It is rare to find a running, driving Cadillac with a 500 CI engine and functional power accessories in this price range. However, buyers should still be aware that low purchase price vehicles often come with deferred maintenance needs, even if they are currently operational. Overall, I think this 1975 Cadillac Calais offers a budget-friendly way to experience classic American luxury from the 1970s. It is not a performance car or a high-value collectible, but it could be a fun, character-filled cruiser for someone who appreciates large vintage sedans and does not mind an unconventional appearance. If the condition truly matches the description and rust is minimal, it could represent very strong value for the price. Number 13, 1974, Plymouth Roadrunner, listed at $48,500 and located in Ottawa, Illinois. In my opinion, this is a very different category of Roadrunner compared to the earlier $14,700 Survivor example. This is clearly positioned as a high-spec, heavily optioned performance build with both rarity appeal and upgraded mechanical strength, rather than an untouched original car. The most important feature here is the factory 4-speed sunroof configuration. The seller claims approximately 10,400 of these were built, and while production numbers like this should always be verified carefully, a sunroof-equipped B-body Mopar with a manual transmission is undeniably uncommon. In my opinion, options like sunroof, factory AC, cruise control, and power accessories push this car into the loaded muscle car category, which is already a niche within a niche. Mechanically, the engine setup is the most significant aspect. It is described as a numbers-matching engine and transmission, but also upgraded with a 440-source 512-stroker kit and aluminum heads. In my opinion, this places the car in a modified performance class rather than a strict collector original category. A 512-stroker Mopar big block is a serious power configuration, likely producing substantial torque and horsepower beyond factory specifications. Combined with a Dana 4.10 rear end, this setup strongly suggests a car built for acceleration rather than highway cruising comfort. The presence of power steering, power brakes, air conditioning, and cruise control is an interesting contrast to the performance build. In my opinion, this combination makes the car somewhat unique. It is both a high-performance muscle car and a relatively well-equipped cruiser. That dual-purpose nature can be appealing, but it also means the car sits between categories rather than fully belonging to either pure stock collector or pure race-style build. The inclusion of rare features such as an electric rear window defroster and console bucket seat configuration adds to its loaded option identity. These details matter in Mopar collecting because option combinations often define value more than raw base model production numbers. The seller mentions that the car had an older repaint with some chips and bubbles. This is important because it suggests the car is not a fresh, show-quality restoration. In my opinion, that puts emphasis back on its mechanical strength and rarity rather than cosmetic perfection. At $48,500, this Roadrunner is priced in the mid to upper range for modified but highly optioned B-body Mopars. Compared to the earlier $14,700 Survivor example, this one is not about originality. It is about specification, performance upgrades, and rare factory options combined into one package. Overall, my opinion is that this 1974 Plymouth Roadrunner represents a heavily optioned, performance-oriented Mopar that blends rarity, strong drivetrain upgrades, and comfort features in a single build. It is not a pure collector restoration piece, but rather a powerful and well-equipped muscle car designed to be driven and enjoyed with significant performance capability. Number 14, 1972 Pontiac LeMans, offered at $29,500 and currently located in Kidder, Missouri. From my perspective, This is a solid mid-tier classic Pontiac that sits in an interesting space between entry-level cruisers and higher-end muscle cars like the GTO. The LeMans name doesn't always get the same attention as its more famous siblings, but in many cases it shares similar mechanical DNA, which makes it an appealing option for enthusiasts who want classic Pontiac V8 performance without paying GTO premiums. The key highlight here is the 400 cubic inch 4-barrel V8 paired with an automatic transmission. In my opinion, this is the heart of the car and the main reason it holds value. Pontiac's 400 V8 is well regarded for its strong torque delivery and smooth power characteristics, making it well suited for both cruising and occasional spirited driving. The seller lists the vehicle as being in very good condition, with no significant damage or problems. While that is a fairly general statement, I think it suggests the car is being presented as a ready-to-drive classic rather than a restoration project. However, in my opinion, any serious buyer would still want to inspect the body and undercarriage closely, especially on Midwestern cars where rust can sometimes be hidden. The blue exterior paired with a white interior is a classic and visually appealing combination. Personally, I think this color pairing works especially well on early 1970s Pontiacs because it emphasizes the body lines without being overly aggressive or flashy. One detail worth noting is the mileage claim of just over 25,000 miles. If accurate, that would be relatively low for a 1972 model, but as with most classic listings, mileage should always be verified through documentation or condition assessment. In my opinion, condition consistency often tells a more reliable story than the odometer alone. The listing itself is somewhat brief and includes dealership information rather than a detailed private seller description. The mention of financing and trade-in suggests this vehicle is being sold through a dealer, which can be a positive for buyers who prefer structured transactions and possibly financing options. However, it can also mean less detailed transparency compared to private enthusiast sellers. What I find most appealing about this LeMans is its simplicity. It's not heavily modified, not presented as a full restomod, and not over-described with performance claims. It appears to be a straightforward V8 classic Pontiac that can be driven and enjoyed as is. At $29,500, I think this car sits in a moderate price bracket for early 1970s Pontiac full-size/mid-size V8 coupes. It's not cheap, but it also reflects the value of a 400 V8 equipped classic in present-day market conditions. Overall, my opinion is that this 1972 Pontiac LeMans is a clean, V8-powered cruiser with classic Pontiac character and decent usability potential. While the listing lacks detailed mechanical and restoration information, the combination of drivetrain, condition claim, and dealer presentation suggests a usable classic that could appeal to someone looking for a traditional American V8 experience without stepping into high-end GTO pricing. Number 15. 1969 Plymouth Fury, listed at $1,000 and located in Belleville, Illinois. In my opinion, this is a very typical, cheap classic Mopar project, listing where the value is almost entirely based on completeness rather than condition or drivability. At this price point, you are not really evaluating a car as a driver. You are evaluating how much effort it will take to bring it back to a functional state, or whether it is better used as a parts donor. The most important positive detail here is that the car is described as mostly complete. In my opinion, completeness is everything in a sub-$2,000 full-size classic. Trim pieces, glass, interior components, and body panels are often far more difficult and expensive to source than mechanical parts, so having a mostly intact car can make a huge difference for either restoration or parts harvesting. It is also notable that the engine runs on starting fluid. That tells us the motor is not fully seized and can at least rotate and fire, which is a meaningful starting point. In my opinion, however, running on starting fluid alone also signals that the fuel system is completely non-functional, which is consistent with the seller's note that it needs a gas tank. The lack of brakes is another major factor. In my opinion, a non-braking full-size car from the late 1960s should always be treated as non-drivable regardless of whether it starts. Brake system rebuilds on cars of this era can quickly escalate in cost and effort, especially if lines, wheel cylinders, and master cylinder all need replacement. The fact that only 3 out of 4 tires hold air reinforces the idea that this is a non-roadworthy project. In my opinion, this kind of condition usually means the vehicle has been sitting for a long time and will require a full recommissioning process before it can safely move under its own power. The mileage claim of 64,000 miles is interesting, but in this context it is not something I would place heavy emphasis on. In my opinion, once a car reaches this level of mechanical neglect, mileage becomes less relevant than overall condition and corrosion status. The 1969 Plymouth Fury itself is a solid full-size Mopar platform, known for durability and simplicity rather than high performance in most trims. However, it is not a particularly high-value collector car unless it is a specific performance variant or in exceptional condition. That means its market value is heavily tied to usability, restoration quality, or parts demand. At $1,000, the asking price is low enough that the car could make sense in a few different ways. As a budget restoration base, a donor for another Mopar project, or even as a part source for someone already working on a similar platform. In my opinion, the key question is not whether it is worth it, but whether the buyer has the time, space, and additional budget to take on a full recommissioning project. If I were evaluating this Fury in person, I would focus first on rust in the floor pans, trunk, and frame rails, then assess the condition of the drivetrain beyond initial startup, and finally determine how complete the trim and interior really are compared to what is visible in photos. Those factors would determine whether this is a viable restoration candidate or simply a parts car with a title. Overall, my impression is that this 1969 Plymouth Fury is a very low entry cost classic that comes with significant mechanical and safety deficiencies. It has the advantage of being mostly complete and at least partially running, but it is firmly in project territory. For the right buyer, it could be a starting point for a long-term build, but it is not a turnkey classic by any standard.